Have you ever loved someone so much that even the other person's silence hurt more than any scream? There was a time when they looked at each other as if they recognized each other. Then, all that was left was the steam rising between two gazes that no longer met. Stay with me until the end, and I'll tell you how a warm tea rekindled an almost lost love. I wasn't made to carry storms, but for a long time, I sheltered lightning disguised as silence. I was molded with delicacy, with human hands that perhaps never imagined the soul that would grow inside me. My handles curve like arms that want to embrace, and my smooth interior was made to welcome warmth, comfort, shelter, never absence. But it's curious how time deposits memories on the edges of a porcelain. Each use, a trace. Each touch, a presence. And each absence, an invisible scar that not even the softest chamomile tea can erase. My name never was said out loud. They never called me. But I was always there. Present every morning, between her fingers, under his gaze, between the two of them, without ever moving of my own free will, but always participating, always listening, always feeling. For years, I was the bridge of a tenderness that was served in sips, of an affection that dissolved into sugar and steam. Until one day the warmth turned to ice. And the tea, which used to be a reason for getting closer, became just an excuse to say nothing. I arrived there without a choice, but I stayed for everything I saw. Because even though my days were made of ceramics and silence, I watched love being born right before my eyes. I was handmade, painted with care, in a factory where men and women repeated gestures 1,000 times a day, without knowing that they were giving shape to something that would one day have a soul. I wasn't born with a soul, I gained one over time. Every time I was touched by human hands, every time the warmth of the tea filled me inside, I felt life gaining space where before there was only emptiness. And that's how I became more than a cup. I became a witness. The moment Clara held me was like a baptism. She was about to move with Miguel to their small apartment in the city center. There were no curtains on the windows yet, no pictures on the walls. Just boxes, piles of dreams wrapped in newspaper, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with the light lavender perfume she wore around her neck. Clara opened my box carefully, removed the paper that wrapped me as if undoing a secret, and smiled. "These are special," she said. And she placed me next to 5 others like me, all white, all with small blue flowers, as if we were holding hands. Clara and Miguel had little. A mattress on the floor, 2 plates, an old teapot inherited from her grandmother, and a kettle that made more noise than it should. But there was laughter, there was touch, there was hunger, and there was time. In the beginning, they had for a long time. They spent hours on the small couch, sharing blankets, discussing movies, rehearsing plans for a future that still seemed distant and at the same time inevitable. The apartment was tiny, but its few square meters could fit universes. The two of them laughed, cried, kept quiet, and met in every corner. The kitchen was the heart of the house. And I, there on the shelf, was the heart of the kitchen. Miguel liked to draw. He had notebooks scattered everywhere, with faces, landscapes, hands. Sometimes he would draw Clara without her noticing. Just her eyes, just the way she put her feet on the chair, or how she frowned while cutting onions. He drew what he wanted to keep. Clara was already writing. In hidden notebooks, on the back of bills, on bread paper. She wrote to relieve, to understand, to not forget who she was. Her words were raw, painful, but sincere. I wondered if Miguel had already read them, and if he had, what he must have felt. The tea I received was chamomile. Clara woke up before him and prepared everything in silence. The water boiled while sunlight flooded into the kitchen through the cracks in the blinds, drawing stripes on the wooden floor. She held my handle delicately, as if she were holding a secret, and poured the steaming golden liquid. Then she placed me in front of Miguel, who still had his eyes half closed, and said, "I drank this last night and slept like a log." He laughed. He took me with one of his hands, still warm from sleep, and brought me to his lips. At that moment, I felt his warmth inside and out. I felt my whole life passing slowly, as if time had stopped for that sip. And so the rituals were born. You small habits that, together, form the backbone of a love. On Sundays, Clara would prepare tea for the two of them. Chamomile, lemon balm, hibiscus, mint. Each week, a different flavor. Miguel would draw while he waited, or just watch her in silence. There was tenderness in that look. Not an impetuous passion, the kind that screams, but something deeper, more subtle. An affection that settles into the corners of routine, that can be recognized in the sound of the kettle, the temperature of the tea, the comfortable silence. Clara's favorite cup was always mine. She chose me without I could see, among all the other almost identical ones. Maybe it was the slightly crooked design of my central flower. Maybe it was the touch, the weight, the memory. I was becoming impregnated with her. With the smell of her skin, the invisible residue of her lips, the sadness that sometimes ran down her eyes and fell on me as if the tea had become salty. Miguel noticed. Sometimes he would ask, "Is everything okay?" And she would smile with that crooked smile that said no, but yes, but maybe. The apartment gained color. Light curtains, cushions, flowers, books, plants. Clara hung a mobile in the kitchen window, and the sound of the bells danced with the wind. Sometimes, tea was served in the late afternoon, with warm bread and butter. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, after a bout of insomnia or a nightmare. Time passed like this, between sips, words, silences, and touches. But time, as always, also took things. It took the easy laughter, it took the lightness. Demands came, the tiredness, the tight deadlines. Miguel started arriving later. Clara spoke less. Her eyes were different. Not faded, but with a shadow, a distance. As if she were there, but not completely. And the tea continued. It continued because it was a habit, because it was easy, because no one wanted to realize that even the sweetest ritual can become just routine. One day, Clara held me too tightly. Her hand was shaking. She placed me firmly on the table, looked at Miguel and simply said, "It's difficult." He didn't answer. He just looked at me as if I could tell him what to do. As if I, who had always been there, knew how to bring Clara back. But I was alone a cup. And what I was carrying now was no longer tea, it was the pain of two hearts that were slowly losing touch. And so the silences began to accumulate. At first short, then long. The tea was served, but no one said anything. I was placed between them like a mute mediator, waiting for a conversation that never came. The steam rose, time passed, and they remained silent, trapped in thoughts they no longer shared. And yet I was there, observing everything, keeping everything. As always, Clara's hands had a unique way of holding me. It wasn't just functional, like someone picking up a cup to drink from. It was like someone holding a memory, like someone touching something sacred. From the beginning, I realized that, for her, tea was more than a hot drink. It was a kind of refuge, a gesture of self-care, and sometimes, a silent request for attention. Miguel never realized it right away. He was in a hurry. I worked in one agency where the hours slipped by like fine sand through your fingers. I would return home tired, with my head full, and my body asking for bed. Clara was waiting. She was waiting with the kettle on the stove, the chamomile tea bag already set aside, and an intention that Miguel, in the first few months, didn't know how to accept. "Come and have some before it gets cold." She would say, I'm just going to finish this email." He would reply, always with one eye on the screen and the other on the hours that escaped him. She would sit alone at the table, blowing out the steam that rose from me like a contained sigh, and slowly bringing me to her lips. In silence, tentatively. Sometimes he would arrive on time, other times not. But she never stopped preparing. She never stopped waiting. On the weekends, when time seemed to slow down, something different would emerge between them. The kitchen would take on a different rhythm. The steps were lighter, the words longer. Miguel would play the old radio, Clara would sing softly as she cut fruit, and I would be placed right in the center of the table, between two smiles that seemed to have been searching for each other since the beginning of the day. "If we could freeze this moment," she said one morning, sitting with her legs crossed on the chair, "it would end up in ice, and you know I prefer it warm." He joked. "Then let it last just long enough to stay in my memory." Miguel looked at her. A long, unhurried look. "You are my good memory, Clara." And she downloaded you eyes, smiled at the corner of his mouth, and held me with both hands, as if holding something he wanted to protect. At that moment, I felt that there was something growing between them. Something bigger than routine, bigger than fear. And I, who had previously been just hand-painted porcelain, began to hold within me not only tea, but the first certainties of a love that was beginning to mature. It was on a rainy late afternoon that the first cracks became clearly visible. The water was beating gently on the window, drawing paths that flowed like unspoken thoughts. Clara was home earlier. The kettle already squeaked, and she walked around the kitchen with her shoulders tense, as if each step carried the weight of something she didn't yet know how to say. When Miguel walked in, wet to the hem of his pants, the first thing he saw was the set table. I was there, full, steaming, between 2 slices of bread with melted cheese. "Did you make this?" he asked, taking off his coat. "I thought we could have an early dinner." "Talk calmly," she answered, sitting down at the table. He hesitated. He looked at his cell phone. Then he looked at me. "I just need to answer one thing, Miguel, please," she interrupted, firmly, but with a choked voice. He dropped the cell phone on the counter. He sat down. He picked me up carefully, as if holding something too fragile. He drank in silence. "I feel like there's something between us," she said, looking at him. He nodded slowly. "I feel it too. But I don't know what it is. Maybe time. Maybe haste. Maybe me," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Or maybe me," he replied, lowering his gaze. They stayed like that for a few seconds, with the sound of the rain filling the space where words failed. I, in the center of the table, knew that what was flowing from her eyes was not just sadness. It was fear. Fear of no longer being seen. Fear of having become invisible to the man she still loved. "Do you think we're losing each other?" she asked. "I think we got distracted," he replied. "You let life get louder than our voices." She ran her hands over her face and took a deep breath. "But do you still want to try?" He looked her in the eyes, with an almost childlike honesty. "I never stopped wanting to. I just didn't know how." She reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "Then start here. One sip at a time." He squeezed her hand. The steam was still rising slowly from me, and in that moment, I was more than a vessel. I was witness to a choice. The choice to continue, even though I was afraid. Even though I wasn't sure. After that rainy night, something changed. Not in a grand way, like in the movies Clara liked to watch on Sunday afternoons, but at a pace closer to reality. One step forward, half to the side, another back. They didn't go back to being the way they were in the beginning, and maybe they didn't even want to. But they started to notice each other again. And for me, who felt the soul in every touch, it was like being reborn. Clara started talking more. About the day, the patients at the hospital, the pain that wasn't hers, but that she took home as if it were. Miguel listened. And sometimes he didn't know what to say, but he learned to stay. There was a lady today, she died holding her granddaughter's hand. I almost cried with her, she said one night, her voice breaking, holding me between her fingers. Miguel watched her for a few seconds, then came closer and touched her shoulder with his forehead. "I like the way you feel the world, you know? Sometimes I wish I felt less. If you felt less, you wouldn't be you." She smiled and slowly brought me to her mouth. And that tea, which had previously been just a habit, became affection again. They created new rituals. Miguel began to draw Clara while she slept. He made loose, quick scribbles, almost as if he wanted to capture what was impossible to retain. And he left the drawings on the table, close to me, so that she would see them in the morning. "Do you see me as beautiful even when my hair is messed up?" she asked once, laughing, with the cup still warm in her hands. "You're beautiful even when you're not even trying," he replied with that crooked smile she loved so much. The nights became places of refuge again. The sofa he welcomed me with the softness of someone who already knows their bodies. The series were an excuse. What was real was the touching of shoulders, the intertwined feet, the comfortable silence. Sometimes Miguel would get up in the middle of the night, go to the kitchen, prepare lavender tea, Clara's favorite, and leave it next to the bed. I was once again part of the tenderness that he could not express in words. But life, with its insistent unpredictability, is not content with moments that are too good for too long. And little by little, the outside world began to invade again. Pressures, demands, the overdue electricity bill. One day, Clara arrived and found Miguel distracted too much to notice her. "You didn't even look at me," she said firmly, standing in the doorway. "Sorry, I'm doing some freelance work here, it's important." "And me." He looked at her. There was weariness in both of them. "You've always been important, Clara." She came closer. She picked me up from the counter. "Then try it." And she made the tea. Maybe she didn't say it with words. But that night, she offered it to me as a last gesture of hope. That night, Miguel didn't respond with promises. He responded with presence. He sat at the table in silence, waited for the tea to be ready. Clara placed me in front of him with a sober gesture, without words. There was something sacred in that moment. Behind the daily tasks, the unanswered messages, the coffees that go cold without being touched, Clara and Miguel no longer knew exactly when they had started to drift apart. They only knew that, somehow, they were far away. And they continued pretending not to. Clara started talking to her friends on her cell phone while she made tea. She laughed loudly, exaggerated her stories, used words she didn't use with Miguel. When she hung up, she would stare at me for a few seconds, as if trying to remember who she was before all that. "I think I'm tired of being half," she said one afternoon, holding me tightly. Miguel went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and got some water. He didn't ask anything. "You don't even want to know who I was talking to?" She teased. "It was a friend, right? And if it wasn't?" He looked at her for a second, then looked away. "You wouldn't do that to me." She smiled, but it wasn't a pretty smile. "You already did. Just in a different way." Miguel frowned. "I've never cheated on you. Not with anyone else. But with your absence." That sentence lingered in the air like the smell of something burning. He left the kitchen. And I remained there, still warm in her hands, trying to comfort a soul that not even she knew how to calm. The following days were dry. Miguel slept on the couch some nights. Clara pretended not to notice. Other nights, she slept on her back, curled up, while he watched her in the dark, unsure if he still had the right to touch her. "Do you still love me?" he asked one morning, softly, with a trembling voice. Clara pretended to sleep. Or maybe she really did. But she didn't answer. And Miguel cried silently, like someone who finally understands what he's missing. The next morning, she made tea. For both of them. She carefully filled it with tea, put in a chamomile tea bag and a slice of lemon. "Shall we talk?" she said, placing me in front of him at the table. He nodded, but he didn't know where to start. "When did we stop seeing each other?" she asked. "I still see you, Clara. But you don't see me anymore." He lowered his head. "I miss you, even when you're here." "Then why does it feel like you're already gone?" Miguel took a deep breath. He drank me in one gulp. "Because I don't know how to stay anymore." That one was the first this time Clara didn't cry. She just got up, grabbed her coat and left. I stayed on the table, still warm. Abandoned like something that was once precious, and is now just a memory. The days that followed were the quietest. The house looked like an empty theater after a sad play. The table remained set, but the empty seats said more than any interrupted dialogue. I, who had once been part of the ritual of affection between the two, was now just another object on top of the cold wood, forgotten as if my presence reminded them of everything they had lost. Clara would come home later. Stopped in front of the hallway mirror before entering, he would take a deep breath, rehearsing the face he wanted to show. When he passed Miguel, he barely looked at him. Sometimes they would exchange hi, other times not even that. But the cruelest thing was the way they avoided any subject that might force them to remember who they were. Miguel, on the other hand, immersed himself in his work. He slept later and later, with headphones on, as if music could protect him from reality. The early mornings became a refuge. He would pace back and forth, sit on the couch with his head in his hands. And sometimes, when the pain got too much, he would come to the kitchen and pick me up. Not to make tea, just to hold me. "I'm sorry," he would say, as if I were capable of bringing those words to her. I don't know what went wrong. We just lost touch. One of those nights, Clara woke up and saw him there, sitting at the table, staring at me like someone staring into a small but deep abyss. "Do you still like me?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, tired. "What? It's not about liking, Clara." She walked in, pulled up a chair, and sat facing him. "So what's it about?" Miguel hesitated. He ran his hand through his hair, leaning his elbows on the table. "It's about feeling like everything we were is behind us. And I don't know how to bring it back." "Did you try?" "I tried. Silently. In my own way. But you didn't listen." She laughed, a hurt laugh. "Do you really think I don't listen? I listen to everything, Miguel. Even what you don't say." He lowered his head. Claire was silent for a while. Then she picked me up from the center of the table, as she used to do. "Then let's try one last time. Tomorrow. Tea at 7. Like it was in the beginning." He didn't answer. She got up and went to sleep. And I stayed there, in the darkness of the kitchen, feeling for the first time the weight of a promise that might not be fulfilled. The next morning, the house was silent. The kind of silence that precedes the end of something. Clara woke up before the sun. She put on her light blue nightgown, the same one she'd worn in the first months of their relationship, and tied her hair up haphazardly. The kettle was in its usual place, but its presence on the counter seemed more symbolic than functional. She took me with firm hands, without hesitation. She chose the fennel tea, as if trying to summon the memory of a time when words flowed between them with ease. Work, even on his days off. Clara immersed herself in books and series, filling every minute so as not to feel. But what hurt the most was that no one mentioned the other. The name, Miguel, never left Clara's mouth. And Claire had become just a contained presence in the room, like a fixed piece of furniture in the house. One night, I heard her voice, muffled on the phone. "I don't know what to do, Luisa. We don't fight anymore. But we don't live together either. It's like we're roommates. Sometimes I walk past him and feel like he's been gone for weeks." Suppressed tears. "And the worst part is that I'm gone too. Only my body remains." And then for the first time in weeks, the closet door opened. Clara grabbed me with both hands. Looked at me put some seconds, as if she were rediscovering an old photo. She ran her fingers along my edges, as if searching for an answer in them. "Do you remember when we still made plans?" She made chamomile tea. She placed me on the table. She sat down. And cried. Miguel arrived shortly after. The kitchen light was still on. He stopped at the door, took in the scene, Clara with her head down, her eyes red, and me there, fuming again. "You made tea," he said, almost in disbelief. She raised her face. "I did, because it's all I still know how to do for us." He approached slowly. He sat down. He took me in silence. He took a sip. "It's the same as it was at the beginning." "No. It's more bitter. But it still warms." She nodded. Their eyes met. For a moment, very brief, there was the same old warmth there. But it was fragile. Very fragile. And when the tea was finished, each of us went to a corner of the house. As two strangers who for some reason, still live at the same address. The following Saturday, Clara woke up early. Before the light touched the windows, before the noise of the neighbors. She dressed in silence, put on light sandals and began to open drawers. She separated clothes, shoes, books, all with the precision of someone who no longer wanted to hesitate. Miguel got up to the sound of suitcases being dragged. "Are you going on a trip?" he asked, standing in the hallway, his face swollen with sleep. She didn't answer right away. She continued folding a blouse. Then she looked at him. "I'm going to my sister's house. A few days. Maybe weeks." "Why?" She looked at him for long seconds. There was no anger in her eyes. Only tiredness. "Because I died in here. And if I continue, I don't think I'll ever come back to myself." Miguel breathed background. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just lowered her head and leaned against the wall. Clara went back to the kitchen. She took me from the cupboard with light hands. There was no rush. She made mint tea. The last one. She sat down at the table with her suitcase packed beside her. "You saw everything, right?" she said, looking straight at me. From the first ring to the last silence. Miguel appeared in the doorway. "Can I have a drink with you?" She hesitated. Then she gently pushed me toward her. He sat down. He took me. He drank in silence. "Do you still think there's a way?" she asked. He took his time. "I think what we had was too beautiful to die like that. But I also think we got lost in a place without a map." She agreed. Maybe distance is the only way to remember where the way back is. The steam rose slowly, and I, among them, felt the weight of each word spoken, as if the whole house was listening, as if even the walls, accomplices in this love, knew that this was a goodbye. Not definitive, but necessary. When she finished her tea, she stood up. Miguel did too. They hugged. For a long time. Without saying anything. Just their bodies pressed together, like two hearts trying to hear if they were still beating in time. She picked up her suitcase, went through the door, and didn't look back. Miguel stayed in the kitchen, holding me with both hands. "Come back," he whispered. "Please come back." But she no longer heard. And I, small and still, now carried the bitter taste of a pause that might never end. The following days were of absolute silence. Miguel woke up and spent more time outside the house than in it. When he was there, he withdrew. He ate little. He slept badly. The television was on only for noise. The plants began to wilt. The old radio gathered dust. The kettle? Silent. I remained in the same place. In the center of the table. Untouched. Like a portrait of a time that no longer existed. The tea didn't come back. Nor the notes. Nor the drawings. Only the echo of voices that had inhabited that apartment like birds in a warm nest, and now flew in opposite directions. One night, Miguel came into the kitchen late. The lights were off. Only the faint reflection of the street through the window. He sat down at the table. He took me with both hands. "Do you still remember her?" he asked, as if I were capable of answering. I don't know if I lost Clara, or if she just had to leave to remember who she was. His eyes filled with tears. I thought keeping quiet was the right way to keep things from getting worse. But I think the silence was what killed everything. He stayed there for a long time, caressing me with his thumb, as if I was the only thing he had left with her. The next day, he cleaned the house. He opened the windows. He watered the plants. He folded the clothes that had been on the couch for days. He washed the dishes. He put away the scattered socks. He stood in front of the mirror and looked at himself. And he cried again. But this time, it was the cry of someone who is beginning to understand. Of someone who no longer wants to lose through inertia. Later, he went back to the kitchen. He got the kettle. He filled it. He lit the fire. He washed me carefully. He chose chamomile tea, her favorite. He did everything the way she did. Each gesture had intention. Like an apology that the body says when words have already failed. He placed me on the table. He sat down. And waited. She didn't come back that day. Or the next. But he kept making tea. Every day. At 7 in the morning. And he placed me on the table even though he knew she wouldn't come. Because maybe love needs that. A repeated gesture. A hope in the form of a ritual. A persistence that resists the end. I stayed there. Warm inside, whole outside, filled with a silent faith. Because sometimes what seems like the end is just a pause before the reunion. The table has tea again. But it was a tea served to the void. Miguel did everything as before. Carefully, calmly, with intention. He chose the flavors that Clara preferred, folded the napkin with precision, always positioned me on the right side of the table, her place. And then he sat across from me, without saying anything. He just waited. Not for my immediate arrival, but perhaps for something deeper. The return of a presence that he was beginning to understand he never knew how to truly care for. On the third morning, he wrote a letter. He used plain paper, shaky handwriting. He wrote slowly, between sips of the still hot tea, his hands shaking with fear and regret. Clara, I thought that love was just being close. But I learned that love is also listening, asking, staying even when everything seems lost. I kept quiet when you needed my voice. I closed myself off when you opened up. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll come back. But if you do, I want to be different. Better. Your tea is ready every day at 7. I wait for you with love, Miguel. He folded the paper. He left it on the table. He went out to work. In that later that afternoon, Clara came back. Not to stay, but to get some books she had forgotten. She entered with light steps, without making any noise. She found the house different. Open curtains, the smell of lavender in the air, soft music in the background. And on the table, the letter. She read it with teary eyes. She sat down in the same place as before. She picked it up carefully. She rested her fingers on the edge. And sighed. You still remind me of him. Miguel arrived and found her there, as if in an interrupted dream. You came? She looked at him. His face was tired, but his eyes were alert. Not to stay. Just to get my things. Did you read the letter? She nodded. You write better than you speak. I'm trying to learn to speak. Silence. You're different, she said. I'm trying to be better. Slowly but really. She stood up. She walked over to him. I don't promise anything, but maybe I'll come more often. And I'll be here, with tea ready. She smiled slightly. She touched my handle. After it happened, and he left. Miguel returned to the table. He held me. He closed his eyes. And in that moment I felt it. The water was still warm. And where there is heat, there is still a chance of rebirth. Claire returned the next day. She arrived at the same time she usually prepared tea, when the light gently passes through the window and touches the table like a memory that insists on staying. She was more serene, her hair tied up awkwardly, like in her early years. She carried a notebook in her hands. And a look that was no longer that of someone who came to look for books only. Miguel was in the kitchen, stirring the sugar. When he saw her, he said nothing. He just made room. Can I sit? She asked, even though she knew that that place always had been hers. It's yours. He answered. She sat down. She looked at me. She held me as if testing my temperature. Still warm. I never let it get cold. Why? Miguel thought before answering. Because I didn't want to forget what it was like to take care of you. She looked away for a second. Then she opened the notebook. From inside, she took out a folded sheet of paper. I wrote something too. But it's not an answer. It's all I could get out. He read in silence. When I left, I thought the silence would be the end. But in the silence, I heard the sound of missing. And missing you smelled like you. Your hand. I'm still hurt. But I'm also alive. And living, maybe it's about keeping trying. Miguel folded the paper carefully. Like someone who keeps a dried flower between the pages of an old book. Thank you. I'm also learning to speak. She took a sip. She smiled at the corner of her mouth. You still know how to choose the right flavor. Chamomile with vanilla. Your favorite on cloudy days. Clara nodded. She ran her fingers over the table, as if drawing invisible memories. Remember when we used to scribble down ideas for names for our children? Yes. And we never agreed on any of them. Thank goodness. They would have been born confused. They laughed. A shy but sincere laugh. The first in months. Then they were silent. But it was another silence. The comfortable one. The one that comes when there is no longer any need to prove anything. She finished her tea, stood up, and took the paper back. Can I take this with me? Miguel smiled. Yes. But leave the notebook. She left the notebook on the table. She walked to the door. She looked at him before leaving. Tomorrow, maybe I'll come back. I'll wait for you. With the tea ready. She left. And he held me as if he were holding a fragile but beating heart again. Yes, there was still time. And maybe for the first time, they were truly ready to start over. The days passed like loose leaves in the wind, and Clara began to return more frequently. She didn't say anything. She just arrived. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes late in the afternoon. She never stayed long. But every time she found the tea served hot in the same place. And me there, always waiting, like a memory that insists on remaining present. They spoke little, but with more depth. The words came like seeds thrown into timid soil, small, but with the potential to bloom. "Have you been sleeping better?" she asked once as she stirred the tea with a blue-handled spoon. "Some nights, others not," he answered. "And in your dreams, do I still appear?" "Every day." She smiled, didn't say anything. She drank slowly. Then she took an old keychain out of her pocket. It was the one from the house. The same one he had given her years ago, saying, "Now this is yours too." She placed it on the table. I never stopped carrying it, even after I left. Miguel took the keychain. He turned it between his fingers, as if searching for something invisible. "I always thought you would come back, even when I thought you didn't deserve it. Maybe I also need to come back to myself before I come back to us. If I need to, I'll wait." She touched he held me affectionately, as if I were a link that kept them in touch, even in the silences. "Do you still have faith?" he asked. Miguel looked her in the eyes. "I make tea every day." That afternoon, she stayed longer than usual. She washed the dishes, folded the dishcloth, sat on the sofa and read a chapter out loud from a book she had started on her own. Miguel on the floor, not her, but the moment, the scene, the room, the cup on the table, the folded cloth, the woman who was slowly returning. It was as if they were relearning to share space, not out of obligation, but out of desire. At the end of the afternoon, Clara stood up. "I have to go. Will you come back tomorrow?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. "If the tea stays hot, maybe." And she smiled. A fuller smile. Firmer. He nodded. "You always will be." And I knew it. It was true. Their love now was not the same as before. He was more quiet, more aware. It wasn't fire, it was embers, but hot embers still ignite. And there, between hands that had once been lost, something new was beginning to be born. Clara returned on Friday night, bringing with her the smell of the street, the tiredness of the week, and a different look, less defensive, more curious. Miguel was washing the dishes with his shirt sleeves rolled up when the door opened. He hadn't expected it, but he wasn't scared. She came in without saying a word. She left her bag on the couch, took off her shoes. She walked to the kitchen. She saw the kettle on the stove, the teapot on the counter, and me, positioned in the same place as always. "Do you really do this every day?" she asked, half incredulous, half touched. "Even when I thought you wouldn't come back." She came closer, took my hands. She closed her eyes for a second. She inhaled the vapor, as if it were an old perfume. Then she opened her eyes. "I don't know if I'm the same person who sat here anymore. I'm not the same man either." "Then maybe it's time we got to know who we are now." Through tea. Through tea. They sat down. Neither of them touched their cell phones. Not even the past. Just their present. Miguel served the tea. It was cinnamon and apple. A flavor she said she liked in the winter. And even though it wasn't her favorite anymore, she accepted it. Because the gesture said more than the flavor. It was a memory, but it was also an offering. "Do you still have those drawings?" she asked, stirring the tea with the tip of her spoon. "All of them. I saved them in a folder,